So this... Oh, all good. People think reinventing yourself takes years or a major life crisis. But in reality, a tangible change can happen in weeks, sometimes even days, when you understand the mechanism behind real internal change. Most people try to reinvent themselves by forcing new habits, new routines, and being disciplined. They think if they can just push hard enough and wake up at 5 a.m., force themselves to drink that green juice, and save more money, they will eventually become the person they want to be. But behavior is actually the last thing to change. Think of it like the surface layer of a much deeper inner architecture. This is why people stay stuck in the same loops. They start a new life on Monday or on January 1st, only to fall back into their old habits a few weeks later. They're trying to change their actions while their internal system that produced them stays exactly the same. No amount of willpower can override the inner model of reality that you're operating from. To put it another way, you don't experience life as it is. You experience it as you are. Everything you see and perceive is filtered through your current sense of self. So the real reason people fail at reinvention isn't their lack of discipline, is that they're trying to create a new life from the perspective of an old self. I've lived this in my own life. Before I stepped onto the path of an aligned, soul-led business, I actually spent years building a corporate marketing career around working harder, pushing more, and constantly trying to prove myself. As an immigrant in a foreign country at age 17, most of my major life decisions were based on the need for survival. I actually didn't question which version of me would I like to become until much later in life, when I faced a health-related issue that made me slow down and rethink my choices. Today I will show you how to create change in your life so fast that it will look like magic to others. And you do not need to wait for a major life crisis to do so. You can decide here and now that you want more from life. More joy, more fulfillment, more love. And follow the steps that I give you at the end of this video to start embodying your desired reality today. But before we start, let's talk about the 5 levels of change. So the first level is behavior. Starting with behavior change is actually the foundation of traditional therapy and conventional coaching. And it implies that humans are rational and logical beings. So it relies very heavily on self-discipline and willpower, and we all know how effective those are. When you try to change behavior without addressing emotions and beliefs that cause them, it's like rearranging the furniture in a house that's falling apart. The day that you feel sick or unmotivated or the weather is bad, all of that effort goes out of the window. Level 2 is emotions. And some of the most common emotions that could be blocking your embodiment of your higher self are fear, shame, guilt, and seeking validation, or the feeling of not being enough. This level of change involves practices like nervous system regulation and mindfulness, meditation, body scan, or breath work. As long as you're practicing these methods. And if for some reason you stop, let's say you go on a long vacation, or you're confronted with a challenging situation, those emotions will resurface, because essentially the beliefs that caused them are still intact. So at level 3, we're talking about beliefs and thoughts. You've probably heard that 90-95% of your thoughts every single day are repetitive, and at least 70% of them tend to be negative. If you were to work at this level of change, you would be addressing those repetitive negative thoughts that created the emotions that we spoke about. And this process is the core component of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it helps interrupt the negative thought feedback loops. And the way it works is by separating mental distortions, let's think overgeneralizations, and real facts. Changing at higher levels tends to affect all of the levels below. So by just handling one belief at level 3, dozens of your emotional reactions can change for the better. And these changes also tend to last. Level 4 is metamodels, or your innermost convictions. Think of it like the glasses you're wearing without noticing the frames. If level 3 is a mere thought, and you could be aware of those thoughts, level 4 is actually a template for your operating system, around which hundreds of secondary beliefs and thoughts accumulate. Our reality models are typically created at an unconscious early age or during a traumatic early life experience. Think of it this way. When you were little, your brain was trying to make sense of the world. Every experience that gave you clues around who you are and how to interact with the world get registered as a map through which, most likely, you tend to perceive world up until today without realizing it. So if, let's say, at an early age, your mom wasn't very affectionate because she was busy and tired, it's possible that your little brain may have registered that as I'm not lovable or I can't show my emotions. Then you grow up and you try to build your own relationship on this very shaky foundation and therefore create the perfect circumstances to feel the same way over and over again to reconfirm your operating model. Do you see just how powerful our core beliefs are? If you can change just one of those core beliefs at level 4, then dozens of secondary beliefs, emotions, and hundreds of behavioral patterns could be changed in one swoop. This is a level where radical and fast changes are possible. But very few people tend to go here. They're either completely unaware that they have these meta models that are running their life, or they're just too scared to look into them. This is where, with my clients, we would use hypnotherapy and deep regression techniques to pull those early memories from within their subconscious and bring them into the light. One of the ways you can identify a core belief on your own is to see which events and issues keep recurring year after year. Remember that the world is always reflecting your beliefs back to you like a mirror. Now, level 5 is identity. Think of your identity as your self-concept. It's not just how you look, how you speak, how you act, although those are part of it too, but also a definition of who you are, who you're not, who you want to be and who you don't want to be, and your roles in the society. The reason so few people experience drastic change and the so-called quantum leaping is an attachment to an old identity. You see, we have these deeply ingrained survival instincts living in our bodies. An identity is strongly attached to our false ego. And the thing that our ego fears the most is death. Not a literal death, a metaphorical death. So it will cling onto the old identity as hard as it can just to survive and to keep you where you are. This is also why so many spiritual teachings speak of ego detachment. And that's the caveat to reinventing yourself and becoming unrecognizable in record times. Your old identity has to die to make space for a new one. If you want to become a millionaire business owner, but your old identity is being a 9-to-5 employee living paycheck to paycheck, making such a leap without detaching from an old identity will be nearly impossible. Eckhart Tolle is one of the powerful examples of an identity shift that didn't happen through willpower. Before he became a spiritual teacher, he spent years in deep depression and anxiety. By his own description, his life has become unbearable. One night during a particularly intense episode, he had a moment of radical clarity where he realized that this voice in his head is actually not him. That single recognition, that separation between the observing consciousness and the conditioned identity dissolved the old self that he had been struggling to hold together. The next morning, he says that he woke up with a sense of clarity and profound peace that stayed with him ever since. Notice how he didn't upgrade his habits or try to become a better person. His life shifted because the identity he was operating from collapsed, and a new one emerged from a deeper state of awareness. All of his later teachings were actually born from this identity level transformation, including one of my favorite books, The Power of Now, which I recommend to anyone starting on the mindfulness journey. Here's the good news. You can make this process fun and enjoyable. Remember when you were a kid and you liked to dress up as different characters? Imagine how freeing it is to design your own game and to be a superhero of your own making. Now, this is how you do it. The practical 30-day system. We'll take week 1. In week 1, I call it the energy reset. So at this initial stage, before you start aligning with what you desire, it is important that you do so from a place of well-being, not a place of mental and emotional exhaustion. I have another video on burnout on my channel, so if you haven't watched that, go and watch it first. But essentially, on week 1, I want you to identify your common energy drainers in your life. And these could be lifestyle habits, unfinished tasks, unkept promises to yourself and other people, potentially certain foods or even people in your life, and proactively replace them with things that do give you energy. And the second thing you're going to do in week 1 is to create a daily container for peace and quietness. And this is the part where we learn to detach from our ego self. And what do I mean practically? You find 30 minutes when you wake up and 30 minutes right before you go to bed to just sit with your eyes closed and breathe. You do not need a special guided meditation, but you do need to retrieve attention from the outside world and place it inside. This is a point where you release all judgments, all knowledge, and all opinions, and enter the viewpoint of that silent observer who is always there. And my favorite mantra for this practice is be here now, creating nothing, resisting nothing, and desiring nothing. Week 2 is the most crucial, and this is broken down in 2 parts. In part 1, from that peaceful state that you just created, you tune into your heart space and you ask yourself, what does my soul truly desire? You can do a higher self meditation, there is plenty of those on YouTube, or just any kind of practice that will help you visualize and define a reality that you wish to experience. This needs to be something that is aligned with your soul, that you're willing to live up to, and that is accessible to you. Allow yourself to look at this new version of yourself with no effort to imagine it, and write down, first, what are some of the characteristics of that version of you? Second, what do I believe about myself, about the world, and what is possible that the current version of me doesn't believe? Third, what are some of the most common thoughts that this person has on a daily basis? 4, what are some of the dominant emotions they experience? And 5, what is she focused on? What are some of the daily actions and directions she's taking? So you spend your second week essentially getting to know this version and answering the following questions. Why do I want to be this self? What does she have access to that I don't? And finally, the most important one, what part of my old self do I need to let go in order to step into her? It doesn't need to be perfect, but do try to notice the most prominent qualities, anything that stands out for you, and write them down. And the second part of week 2 is, once you have it very clear, enter a viewpoint of the person who is already experiencing a complete fulfillment of this reality. So this is the second part of your meditation. And here, the difference is that you no longer look at her, but as her. You immerse yourself in that reality and enjoy it with ease and gratitude for the pure sake of feeling joy and happiness in the moment. At this point, it's very important that you use all 5 senses. So imagine a scene that comes to you the easiest and try to touch objects in that reality. Notice the smells, the flavors. The more real you can make it, the easier it is for your brain to start to get accustomed to this reality, to feel what it feels like, and not resist it when it does come. What we're doing here is making your desire feel familiar. We're taking it off the pedestal. In week 3, once you're deeply familiar with the desired identity you want to experience, we can start to embody it. Not only observe it or feel in your body what it feels like to be her, but also know what it feels like. And what do I mean by this? Here's the list of questions that I use to get as detailed as possible. You can pause this video and take a screenshot. Also included this list in the description of this video. Pick a few of these that are the most representative for you and create tangible daily actions that would transport you into that identity. For instance, it could be the easiest for you to start with physical looks or the places that this person would go to every single day. Let's say you want to embody a version of you who is a successful 7-figure business owner. Think of how that person would dress. How would they take care of themselves? How would they talk to strangers? Where would they drink their daily coffee? We're looking for sensory experiences here, and these don't need to be luxurious or expensive. Please don't go out of your way and get into debt to buy things you can't afford. Think of the things and experiences that are accessible to you right now, but would still bring that internal, almost frequency shift that we're looking for. For example, I knew that in order to fully embody the identity of a YouTube content creator, I wanted a professional studio setup because this version of me cares about aesthetics. And the result is the image you see on the screen, as well as my internal frequency. Remember, we're working with the identity level coherence, so technically action isn't even necessary. But because you believed your whole life that action is the cause of your reality, and we want your brain on board with this new project, we've included aligned action in this plan. Acting as if is very powerful, because what it does is it bridges the gap between you, your mind, and your physical reality. And in week 4, we rest in fulfillment and learn to let that image go. You do not try to make it happen because you've already claimed it as real. You do not wait. You do not hope for it in the future. You rest in knowing that it's already here. Think of when you place an order in an online store. You wouldn't go and check every hour if your order is coming. You wouldn't ask customer service if it's on its way. You just go about your day knowing that it's coming. You have almost that sense of expectancy. Of course it's coming. And that's the attitude that we're looking for here. There will be a period of time where your 3D reality is not catching up to the new identity you've claimed yet. How you handle that determines the speed with which your desired new reality will manifest. Another quote from Frederick Dodson that I like, that helps me a lot, is, "This may be how things still are, but this is no longer how I am." When you don't have the evidence yet, this is when you use that as an opportunity to reaffirm your intentions and embody the change. Think about the invention of the airplane. Before the Wright brothers successfully flew the first aircraft, they had to envision the world where flying planes was possible, long before there was any physical evidence for it. For thousands of years, people admired birds and dreamt of flying, but they considered it to be impossible. So there had to be somebody who had the imagination and the belief and the work ethic to make it work, to envision the world where people fly. Your imagination is where it starts. Decide that this is where you're going and commit to it wholeheartedly. No looking back, no hesitations, no what ifs. As Neville Goddard said, begin at the end and stay there. The infinity takes care of the rest. We both know that the next 30 days are going to pass regardless. You do not need to wait for January 1st to commit to the new version of yourself. If you want real change, you can take this framework and apply it for yourself over the next 30 days. These are the exact steps that I use with my clients when they're stepping into a new identity. If you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Real change doesn't start with forcing new habits. It also doesn't start on Monday. It starts with shifting the way that you see yourself. When a new identity becomes as commonplace as breathing, you're already there.